Hey everyone, we're talking about functions and we've covered the inputs to functions and we covered the return values or the outputs of functions. And here we're going to say something a little bit about the optional inputs, also called parameters. So let's check that out. And first, I just want to review the terminology here because the terminology can get a little confusing if you're not used to it. So line one, I'm just going to write some comments here in the editor. Line one is and I've got the comment up there as well, but I just want to emphasize that line one is the function header or the definition. Okay, that's where we define the function, and lines 2 through 4 form the function's body. Now, the input the input to the function is name, okay? And it represents a string. Like it has to be a string or else you're not using this particular function correctly. Like you have a syntax or a semantics error. Um, Lines 8, 9, and 10 each, separately call the function, right? We're calling the function hello. So we're asking that function to do something, and we're passing it an input. So for line 8, for example, line 8, the input to the function is Amanda, right? And line 9, of course, the input is Tessa. And in line 10, the input to the function is Darcy. In in I'll just use, I don't want to type all this, so I'll just use line 8 as the example. In line 8, number of chars Amanda is the I guess we should say um, a name or length of name is the output, okay, or it's the return value, okay. And then in line 8, number of chars Amanda is I guess there's no terminology for that, but you might also call that the output, I guess. But it's storing the output I guess is more accurate. Number of chars Amanda is storing the output value. Okay, I'm comfortable with that. I think that that's more accurate to say. So you want to be aware of all of this terminology. Now, sometimes it's useful to give optional inputs to our function or default values to our function. Inputs, optional and default inputs to our function. So, for example, if we wanted to give a default value to the name, like maybe by default we're just going to say hello Marty. Okay, in this case, what we would do is we would come up here to the function header and we would type name equals Marty, like this. Now, you might also hear the word parameter. Like now, we would say Marty is the default parameter or the default input. Okay. So if we call the function again, all right, let's call it again. Number of chars, maybe Marty, equals, but this time we're not going to give it an input. You see that? We're just going to do the open and then immediately the close parentheses, not giving it an input. But by default, name is going to be equal to Marty because that's how we specified the function header. Right. Now let me clear the console and reset the variables. Okay, clear. And I'm going to save, Control S, and then run this thing. So now you'll see it says hi and hello to Amanda, then to Tessa, then to Darcy, and then to Marty. even though we never told it to when we called it. Again, that's because the default parameter is Marty. Also, the length of Marty is stored, right? Just as if we were to input Marty, right? And so the length of Marty is 5, and so that gets returned and stored into number of chars Marty, and you'll see in the variable explorer, number of chars Marty is equal to 5. You might also ask, what happens if I actually put in Marty? Like this. So I'm changing line 11 slightly by putting in Marty. Well, then it's going to do the exact same thing. We're putting in the default value. So let me run that. Let me show it to you. And so we get the same thing printed out, and the same thing is in our variable explorer. So that's how we can use default inputs or default parameters as part of our function. That way the user maybe does not need to input anything to our function, and our function will do something, right? Still, it'll do something. Maybe it says hello to the wrong person, but at least it still runs, right? So this might be useful depending on your application. Thank you.